Celine's voice echoed through my doorbell camera that night. This house will be mine, soon enough. My chest tightened, but years of quiet strength steadied me as I listened. I packed a small bag, locked every pantry door, and disappeared before their grand party began. And that bold move was only the beginning of a holiday they'd never forget. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The December air in Charleston carried the kind of chill that sharpened every breath. I pulled my sweater tighter as I walked down the short path to my mailbox, the morning sky pale and still. Among the usual bills and advertisements lay a glossy red envelope stamped with silver pine cones. I smiled automatically, recognizing Damien's neat block lettering, a Christmas invitation from my son. How thoughtful, I thought, until I slid the card from its sleeve. Gold script listed the guests for a grand holiday dinner at their house. My eyes skimmed the names, familiar family and friends. I read them again slower this time, the winter sun catching the edges of the print. My own name was missing. The smile slipped before I realized it had gone. Maybe it was a printing error. Maybe a second envelope would arrive tomorrow. But a small knot tightened in my chest, a quiet pinch that came from years of understanding how tiny oversights often reveal deeper intentions. I stood on the porch a moment longer, the cold nibbling at my fingers, then went inside and placed the card face down on the counter. By afternoon, I decided to visit Damien. A direct question delivered calmly would clear this up. The walk up their wide porch steps felt heavier than it should. When the door swung open, Celine greeted me with a brightness too polished to be casual. Maris. What a surprise, she said, her voice sparkling like the glitter on her sweater. I got the invitation, I said evenly. It's beautiful. But I think there might have been a mistake. My name wasn't on the list. Celine's smile held, but her eyes shifted just slightly, a flicker like a candle in a draft. Oh, that must be a printer mix-up, she said, waving a hand as if brushing off dust. You know how these online services can be. She launched into chatter about party preparations, catering decorations, a new set of champagne flutes. Her words overlapping so quickly, I barely found space to respond. I nodded, letting her talk, studying the careful placement of every garland and ribbon. Her deflection was smooth, practiced. Something inside me cooled further, not from the December air, but from the quiet certainty that the missing name wasn't an accident. When she left to check on the upstairs decorations, I stayed in the kitchen to help tidy. Damien was in the garage, hammering at something I couldn't see. As I stacked mail on the counter, a glow from the tablet beside the coffee maker caught my eye. An email notification lingered on the unlocked screen. Payment confirmation, catering deposit, $2,500. Beneath it, the last 4 digits of a credit card I recognized immediately as mine. I froze, pulse steady but deep. Celine had used my card. No request, no mention, just an assumption that my resources were hers. I took a slow breath and turned off the screen, my reflection faint in the dark glass. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I slipped my coat on, thanked Damien when he emerged and stepped into the fading light. The Spanish moss along the street swayed in a cold breeze, gray-green against the evening sky. Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel, a quiet storm forming beneath my calm exterior. The invitation had been more than a simple oversight. It was a message, and now I had one of my own. I would watch. I would wait, and I would be ready. The next morning, the sky was still the color of pewter when I woke, mind already alert. The memory of that catering charge pulsed like a steady drumbeat behind my eyes. I brewed coffee, letting the rich scent fill the kitchen while I planned my first quiet step. If Celine thought I was careless with my finances, she had underestimated me. I settled at my desk, a sturdy oak piece that had carried years of tax seasons and careful budgets. The laptop's glow cut through the dim room as I logged into my accounts. At first, the numbers seemed ordinary until I slowed down and compared the dates. Several withdrawals stood out, each just small enough to avoid automated alerts, but together forming a pattern. My pulse quickened as I found a new joint account I had never opened bearing Damien's signature alongside mine. The transactions told a story deposits from my savings outgoing payments to a catering company I didn't know. I felt a quiet burn of disbelief. Someone had taken my name, my trust, and turned them into a blank check. I printed the statement, sliding each page into a folder as if handling evidence. The house was silent except for the printer's soft hum, every sheet another layer of betrayal. By late morning, I needed air. I chose a deliberate path to Cellini's boutique, a chic little shop nestled between a cafe and an antique store. The bell chimed softly as I entered, and Celine's voice floated from the back room. She stood with a friend near a display of glittering scarves, laughing a bit too loudly. "And once the loan clears, the party will be unforgettable," Cellini said, her tone dripping with excitement. I moved slowly along a rack of coats, pretending to browse while each word landed like a stone. Alone. My jaw tightened. Her friend giggled, asking something about interest rates. Celine only shrugged, basking in her own audacity. She hadn't seen me yet, and I chose not to announce myself. Instead, I examined a wool shawl, breathing evenly until they drifted toward the fitting room, still chatting about holiday expenses. I left without a word, the doorbell's soft chime my only farewell. Evening settled over Charleston with a damp chill. Back home, I lit a single lamp and opened my laptop again. I searched for a name I hadn't used in years, a private investigator I'd once hired to help a widowed neighbor through a delicate inheritance dispute. His number appeared unchanged. I saved it to my phone fingers steady. I closed the laptop and looked around the quiet house. The Spanish moss outside swayed against the dark sky, and the ocean's distant hum reached my ears. I felt no panic, only a sharpened focus. Celine thought she was clever, but she hadn't met the patient side of me. I slipped the folder of statements into my desk drawer, locked it, and exhaled slowly. The first stone of my silent strategy was in place, and I would not be rushed. 2 quiet days passed, the kind that look peaceful from the outside but hum with restless thoughts inside. I sat at the kitchen table early, the sky outside still a soft gray. Steam rose from my mug as I reviewed the first email from the investigator. His brief report confirmed what I had already guessed: the catering charge was only the tip of a hidden iceberg. He hinted at larger financial movements connected to accounts in my name. I let the words settle like stones in water, the surface calm, while my mind mapped possibilities. Whatever Cellini planned, it was calculated, and Damien, whether willingly or blindly, was tangled in it. The phone rang mid-morning. I recognized the number, my longtime attorney, Harold. "Maris," he said, voice tight, "we just received a deed transfer request for your house. It has a partial signature from Damien. The bank flagged it for verification. Did you authorize this?" I pressed the receiver tighter. "Absolutely not," he exhaled sharply. "Good. We'll freeze any action until we meet. But someone tried to shift ownership of your property. I'll send the documents to you for review." After we hung up, I stared at the patterned tile floor, a slow anger rising. They weren't just dipping into my credit, they were reaching for the roof over my head. The realization had a strange clarity, like light through crystal. This wasn't carelessness. It was theft wrapped in family ties. That afternoon, a knock startled me from my thoughts. Vera, my neighbor, 2 doors down, stood on the porch. A retired accountant with a keen eye, she offered a small smile and a plate of lemon bars. "Maris, may I come in? I've noticed some odd deliveries at your house courier envelopes after dark. Anything you need help with," I invited her in, grateful for her gentle directness. Over coffee, I explained the suspicious charges and the attempted deed transfer. Her eyes sharpened. "I can help track financial records and cross-check property filings," she said. "No one hides paper trails forever." Her calm confidence steadied me. For the first time since that invitation arrived, I felt the faint lift of hope. We exchanged contact information and a plan she would monitor county records while I tightened every financial lock. As dusk fell, I sat at my desk and moved with quiet purpose. I shifted savings to a new account, updated passwords, and placed key documents into the fireproof safe, each click of the lock a small victory. My actions were deliberate, invisible to Damien and Celine. When the last paper slid into the safe, I rested my hand on the cool metal and breathed deep. The pieces were aligning, and the shadow they had cast over my life would not last. Tomorrow, I thought, would bring the proof I needed. Morning light spilled across the porch as a soft knock broke the quiet. I opened the door to find Clive, my observant neighbor, holding a small USB drive and a folded printout. "Thought you should see this," he said, offering them with a calm that matched my own. Inside, I slipped the drive into my laptop while Clive stood nearby. The video sprang to life Celine at his courtyard gate late evening, laughing with a friend as she accepted a stack of deliveries. The camera caught her words with eerie clarity. "This house will be mine, soon enough." I watched the clip twice, noting the timestamp, the slant of her grin. No gasp, no visible anger crossed my face, only a quiet acknowledgement of what I already suspected. "Thank you, Clive," I said evenly. "This will help." He nodded no further questions and left with the grace of someone who understood the weight of silence. When the door closed, I carried the evidence to the dining table and began a deliberate process. First, the video file and Clive's printout. Next, the screenshot of the catering charge still sitting on my card account. I added the realtor's email with its property valuation and a concise ledger of dates and amounts. I labeled each document, stripping away anything that might be read as speculation. Facts only, no more, no less. The packet grew tidy and sharp like a blade sheathed in manila paper. I wrote a brief outline of what each piece proved: unauthorized spending attempts to transfer the deed, Selena's own recorded claim. My hands stayed steady, the work almost meditative. By mid-afternoon, I composed the email I would not regret. The subject line read, "Concern for Damien and Celine's holiday commitments." 2 paragraphs, no accusation, no plea. I attached the packet and explained the unapproved charges, the suspicious deed activity, and the looming holiday gathering. My words were measured. I sought clarity, not sides. A deep breath, then I pressed send. Almost immediately read receipts, blinked back. Alejandro replied, "First received. Will review. May need to arrive earlier." Minutes later, Valeria followed with 2 pointed questions about specific transaction IDs. I answered briefly, neutral in tone, careful not to show relief or fear. I did not call Damien or Celine. The proof was moving now beyond my control and beyond their ability to bury it. As the sun lowered over Charleston's live oaks, I returned the packet to my safe. Beside it rested my late husband's small silver bell, a quiet reminder to protect the home and the peace we built. I closed the safe and exhaled, feeling the calm of a plan set into motion. By sunset, I knew the proof was no longer mine alone. Now it had its own momentum. The morning air had that soft, salt-sweet chill Charleston keeps for itself in late December. I walked under the oaks along Rutledge, hands tucked in my coat, listening to the quiet clatter of a lone cyclist and the distant horn of a ferry. Peace rode beside me, not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally chosen the simplest path through the mess step aside and let other people carry the weight they kept placing on me. I watched a pair of herons lift from the marsh and thought about Back home, the house glowed with pale winter light. I moved through each room with unhurried care. A small weekend bag sat open on my bed, 2 sweaters, jeans, flats, a book I'd been saving, and the good scarf Damien gave me years ago when gifts were still chosen with attention. I checked the windows, reset the thermostat, and wiped the counters until they shone. The tree lights were unplugged. The good china was wrapped and stored in my closet. Pantry bins were cleaned and stacked, the shelves bare. The phone rang right as I zipped the bag. Damien's name glowed on the screen. I let it ring once more before answering. "Hey, Mom," he began, too bright. "We're finalizing head counts and timing. Selene says perfect. I said steady as tidewater. I'm traveling." silence, then the scrape of his breath, traveling. "Now we need Mom. You know the menu, you and Selene have it," I said. "You'll do fine." There was a rustle and Selene's voice cut in, pressed sweet. "Maris, that's not funny. We have family flying in. You can't just disappear. People are expecting expectations can travel too," I answered. "Mine already have." "Is this about money?" she snapped. "Because we were going to settle." "This is about boundaries," I said. I kept my tone level, neither sermon nor apology. "Merry Christmas, Selene." I ended the call before her next word found shape. The room felt larger. I carried my bag to the car and locked the front door. The keys were cool against my palm as I stood on the porch for one last breath. Down the block, wreaths hung on gas lamps, and a child practiced trumpet through an open window, each brave note turning the corner like a small parade. I drove toward the Ravenel, past the market stalls, and out to the coastal highway where the marsh opened and the light turned silver over the water. Behind me, a pristine house waited with a hollow pantry and a refrigerant. The nearer I drew to the Atlantic, the lighter my chest felt. I wasn't fleeing from anyone. I was traveling toward the quiet I had earned. At a scenic pull-off, I checked the door locks again in my mind, the way nurses recheck medicine, then sipped coffee from the thermos I'd filled before dawn. I thought of my late husband's silver bell in the safe and pictured its shine in the dark like a lighthouse button. The sky thinned from pewter to pearl. I didn't need music. Tires on asphalt and gulls in tea. Before the city limits, I pulled over once more to confirm the last detail. My phone blinked awake, the doorbell camera was armed, motion alerts were on, interior sensors were set to record. I wasn't stalking, I was documenting. If anyone opened a door they had no right to open, the house would remember. Satisfied, I placed the phone face down and traced the seam of the passenger seat with my thumb until the nervous energy slid off my hands and back into the road. I smiled, imagining their faces when they found a spotless kitchen and nothing to serve but whatever they were willing to purchase and prepare. People learn quickly when there is no one left to pick up their slack. By the time the first guests arrived, I would be miles away, watching winter sunlight scatter across the Atlantic and ordering breakfast from a diner that calls everyone Han. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was refusing to participate. For the first time in years, that felt like joy. On the refrigerator, I left a single index card under the shrimp boat magnet. "See you after the holidays. M." No lecture, no recipes. The emptiness said enough. I locked the pantry and slid the key onto my ring. In the study, I opened the safe, touched the trust papers and the folder marked insurance, and set the small silver bell beside them. If anyone else opened that safe, it would be because I invited them. Driving past the Harris Teeter Relief surprised me. I had filled carts for parties I didn't host and washed platters I never ate from. Today there was no list, no rushing, no second-guessing whether a dish would be photogenic. My counters were cleared of that too. At a red light, Damien texted, "Are you serious?" Then Selene is panicking. I typed and deleted 3 replies before settling on the only one that would not feed the fire. "You're capable." I put the phone face down and kept going. The radio hummed carols low, a distant choir instead of a command. Spanish moss trembled from the oaks, and the tide eased towards slack water. I thought of my mother teaching me to baste a turkey, and of the year we burned the rolls and laughed anyway. Somewhere along the way, celebration had become a performance. I was done performing. I would keep the holy part, the gratitude, the quiet, and leave the show to those who needed applause. At the first overlook, I stepped out and let the cold lift the heat from my cheeks. Pelicans skimmed the water in a precise line, each bird trusting the air to hold it. That was the lesson I kept relearning at this age. You do not have to hustle to be worthy of rest. You do not have to audition for a seat at your own table. I stood there until my fingers ached, then climbed back in, set the GPS for a small inn on the island, and eased onto the road. Whatever came next would meet me on my terms. I drove on unhurried while the tide turned. Easy. I woke to the hush of the Atlantic working its slow breath against the shore. From the rental's balcony, the air smelled of salt and cold pine, and the horizon wore a pale band of silver. I cradled my mug and opened the security app. Icons pulsed, motion at my front walk. Another ping, unfamiliar faces at my porch, bundled in holiday scarves, tugging at a handle that wouldn't turn. No anger rose, only that settled stillness you feel after choosing your path. I watched them confer, knock again, peer into windows for the welcoming lights that weren't there. I thought of the lists I used to write Menu Linen's music and felt the weight of those years lift one feather at a time. I sipped, steady. The camera caught Celine's red coat wheeling into view as she hurried up the steps, phone-to-ear expression tight. She tried the lock, then the code, then looked right at the lens and forced a smile for the relatives behind her. The door stayed closed. My heart stayed open but firm. I waited. By noon, the notifications stacked like a crooked tower doorbell rings, shuffling boots, voices clipped by winter wind. I let them play without sound. At first, then turned the volume up a notch and heard the confusion surface. Is she out shopping? Why are the blinds down? An aunt tried to joke. No one laughed. Celine's tone bled through bright brittle. There must be a mix-up, she chirped, waving people toward the backyard as if hospitality were a camera trick. The pantry view triggered when the kitchen door opened, showed bare shelves, the neat emptiness I had left behind like a period at the end of a long sentence. Someone lifted the refrigerator handle. A light flicked on, but there was nothing to admire. The door shut quickly as if emptiness were rude. Calls flooded my phone. Damien, first then groups. I let them go to voicemail, each one another bead on a string I didn't need to wear. I scrolled the live feed again. Children chased each other across my dormant lawn. Celine gestured lips moving fast, selling composure she didn't possess. When a cousin suggested they move the exchange of gifts to the front room, Celine agreed too fast. She pulled a glossy pile from a trunk presents, wrapped with ribbon I recognized from my hall closet tags angled just so. Her hands trembled when she set them down. Even through the lens, I could see it. The plan was fraying. The front room camera captured the circle forming tissue, rustling the small ceremony people make when they want cheer to arrive on schedule. Celine announced a touch too loud that she would help organize the gifts. Then came the hitch. Alejandro plucked a medium parcel tied with navy ribbon and frowned. To Celine from Aunt Marta, he read, then looked at his wife. But Marta mailed ours to Maris last week. Another cousin lifted a bag, the tag taped over another tag beneath it. He peeled gently. My name ghosted up from the glue. The room murmured. Valeria, cool as glass, took 3 packages at random and checked the corners. Each one bore a faint triangle of torn paper where a tag had been swapped. Why, she asked lightly, do so many gifts addressed to Maris now say, Celine's smile tightened until it looked like pain. It was a printing mistake, she said. I fixed the labels so nothing would be awkward. It's already awkward, Alejandro replied, voice even. A child's voice piped up. Is Grandma coming? No one answered him. The camera, indifferent, kept recording the little tremors running through the room, the sideways glances, Damien's color draining Celine's fingers, worrying a ribbon into threads. Questions multiplied. A niece compared handwriting. An uncle asked where the host was. And there, in the small storm of paper and doubt, the party tilted. Silence pooled between them. Valeria's phone chimed. She stepped aside and opened an email thread queued. With a few words to the room, she mirrored her screen to the big television. The first image was a spreadsheet columns listing balances and due dates no lender would envy. The second was a text exchange, Celine's number at the top, the words unmistakable across the grainy camera. Once the deed is in process, we'll refinance. Alejandro respects results. Damien stared at the floor. Alejandro didn't raise his voice. He asked for the transaction IDs. Valeria zoomed in and pointed. Charges hit Maris's card. The catering deposit sits in this account here. The loan short-term, high-interest names, collateral as anticipated equity from primary residence. She didn't have to say whose residence. Faces changed shape. The relatives who had flown in traded looks you remember for years. Someone turned to windows as if light might solve it. Selene tried to rally, "You're twisting this. I was making Christmas special." For whom? Alejandro asked. And with what money? Damien finally spoke hoarse. "Did you use my mother's card?" Selena's reply was a whisper, sharpened to a blade. She wouldn't miss it. The waves kept their patient rhythm while my phone vibrated itself across the nightstand. I let it hum and fade. When Damien's video request lit the screen, I watched the timer pulse, then tapped it away. There was nothing to add that the truth hadn't already said for me. I powered the screen dark and listened to the water. The house would hold. So would I. I set the device face down and breathed until the room matched the sea. I chose silence to speak for me today. So. Moonlight laid a silver path on the Atlantic, and the rental's windows held it like a quiet promise. I stood barefoot on the cool tile phone, face down beside my mug, listening to the surf comb the shore. When I turned the screen, the first alert blinked a live motion at my front steps in Charleston. I breathed once slow. I had chosen absence like a key. Tonight it would turn the lock. The feed opened to an unfamiliar scarf and a gloved hand pressing the bell. A cluster waited, shifting from foot to foot, laughter thin against the cold. No lamp glowed behind my curtains. A second alert chimed. Then another. The porch looked like a small airport at holiday rush arrivals, stacked and nowhere to taxi. Someone tried the knob. It held. A cousin cupped his hands to the glass, fogging a circle and peering in as if hospitality might bloom with enough breath. "Call her again," I read on their lips. I did not answer. I set the phone on the counter and poured more coffee. Minutes later, the side camera woke, showing Selene's red coat sweep into view. She punched the code, then again, then looked up at the lens with rehearsed surprise. The Bolt did not care for theater. It stayed where I'd left it. The lights were off, the heat set low, the rooms arranged like a stage, with the actors missing. The relatives drifted to the backyard arms, cross-wrapped for warmth. When Damien's call flashed, I let it roll to voicemail. His message followed in a tide of others. I let the waves answer for me. On screen, a decision formed. They trooped around to the kitchen entrance. Selene lifted the mat and frowned at nothing. Keys had once lived there. Not anymore. Damien tried the side door and then the garage, tugging. Nothing yielded. Two uncles fetched a toolkit from a trunk. An aunt suggested the window over the sink it had opened easily in summers past. Tonight, it only reflected their faces back at them. Selene's mouth moved fast, blaming the locksmith, the weather me. I tasted salt and kept my eyes on the sea, not the screen. At last, a door opened with Damien's code. They fanned into the dark kitchen like a search party phones lifting for light. The pantry door waited quietly. Damien reached for it. The new lock I'd installed clicked with soft certainty. He tried again, harder. The door answered with silence. They combed the mudroom, the laundry, the hall closet. No spare keys. The set that had once hung by the calendar now rested in the safe with the trust papers. Maybe the garage freezer, someone suggested. They found it unplugged and clean. Voices rose. Children asked about cookies. A teenager asked for the Wi-Fi. Selene pressed her palms flat on my island and said she would order delivery for $25. The apps pushed back with wait times that made jaws clench. An uncle laughed once without mirth. Who throws a party without groceries? He asked no one. Damien called again. I watched the name blink and fade, blink and fade. I could have answered. I could have explained that absence was the boundary words had never secured. Instead, I cleaned my cup, set it in the rack, and walked to the balcony. In the glass, I saw my outline. The living room camera showed the guests settling into discomfort. Coats stayed on. Someone lit a single candle from a purse and set it on the mantel like a tiny sun. Selene paced between the tree and the sofa, whispering to different clusters. Every path led back to the pantry. Every sentence ended at the lock. The calls turned to texts. "Where are you? We need the platters. This is embarrassing." "Mom, pick up." I let them arrive and rest. When Selene finally wrote, "People will think you've lost it," I typed 3 words and then erased them. I would not spend tonight defending my sanity to those who had spent years spending my patience. The surf made its timeless point, and I accepted it. By 10, the backyard camera captured a small exodus to cars. The rest migrated to the living room floor with pizza boxes rescued from a long queue. A child leaned against the tree and fell asleep beneath an ornament I had bought the year Damien learned to drive. For that, my chest tightened, and then released. Love persistent does not require me to drown in it. Near midnight, I dimmed the rental's lights and sat with the quiet that followed. Vindication hummed under my ribs. I had wanted them to see, not to suffer, yet the lesson and the pain arrived together. I thought of the years I'd cooked through fevers and funerals, the mornings I woke before dawn to iron napkins no one noticed. I thought of how many times I had handed over my keys. The phone vibrated one last time on the table. I slid it into a drawer and shut it. I would return when I chose, and on terms I could live with. Until then, the house could speak for me, with its locks and its dark. I let the balcony door stay open a crack and listened for gulls and the far horn of a boat. Down the coast, a porch light blinked twice and went still like a signal I could keep or ignore. I chose stillness. I chose sleep without duty and mourning without apology. The tide would keep its word. I slept by the sea. I silenced the phone once more, and the night accepted it, leaving only water and air and the slow relief of a boundary kept. Tomorrow would bring conversation and consequence. Tonight the sea was enough. Dawn rinsed Charleston in pale gold as I eased off the highway and into the familiar tunnel of oaks. The streets were empty except for a jogger and a newspaper truck, both moving like thoughts you let pass without catching. The air held a clean chill that cleared my head. I drove with the window cracked and let the cold find my cheeks. Last night had been a long answer to a longer question. This morning would be the period at the end of the sentence. When I turned onto my block, the quiet broke. Cars lined both curbs. Coffee cups perched on roofs, voices thin and tired. Damien's sedan sat across my driveway. Selene paced the fury of rehearsal meeting silence. A handful of relatives lingered by the porch faces, folded with the embarrassment of borrowed plans. I parked at the curb and cut the engine. No one saw me at first. I took one breath from my past, one from my future, and stepped out. Heads turned. I walked to the steps, set my keys in my coat pocket, and met their eyes. Damien came down 2 steps, jaw-tight sleep, still gritty at the corners of his eyes. "Mom," he started. "What is going on? We had 20 people here. You vanished. This is unacceptable." "Good morning," I said. "Step back from my door." Selene gave a small, sharp laugh. "Your door? Everyone knows we're moving in after New Year's. Alejandro wanted to see the house last night. You humiliated me." "You handled that yourself," I said, and reached into my tote. "Since you brought up the house, let's be clear." Paper slid against paper. I unfolded the notarized trust documents for all to see. 3 weeks ago, I moved the property into a living trust. I am the settlor and trustee. Upon my death, it passes to a restricted beneficiary. Damien's portion is protected, and no one can sell, pledge, or transfer this home without the trustee's explicit consent. Any deed transfer requests using partial signatures are void. Any loans secured against it without consent are void. The words were calm. The effect was not. A ripple moved through the group. Alejandro, who had stood slightly apart near the walkway, nodded once. Selene blinked fast, calculating, then chose outrage. "You can't just spring this on us. We've been telling people." "Then change the story," I said. "Change it to the true one." Damien's face went from flushed to pale. "Why would you do this without telling me?" "Because you signed papers without telling me," I said, and kept my voice even. "Because you let someone spend my name like a credit limit. Because last night I watched my pantry handle jiggle 20 times and remembered years of handing over my time and keys. The trust is not against you. It is for the house that raised you." Selene tried another tack. "We just needed a little help. You knew I was planning a beautiful Christmas. It would have impressed everyone. You made me look like someone who planned a party in a home she did not own with money that was not hers," Valeria said from the steps behind her. She lifted her phone. "We saw the statements. I let the silence do the work. Then I turned the top page so Damien could read the clause that barred unauthorized encumbrances. He read with the careful shock of a man translating his own life. So you're saying he managed, you cannot enter unless invited. You cannot use my accounts. You cannot assume my labor," I said. "And you cannot continue to treat me as a resource you're entitled to manage." I slid the documents back into the envelope and placed it in my tote. Then I took out a single brass key on a plain ring and held it up. It was for me. From this moment, I said there is no open door policy. If you want to visit, you ask. If you need help, you ask. And if you misuse my name again, you will speak to my attorney before you speak to me. Selene folded her arms. "This is petty. This is a boundary," I said. "It looks strange to those who benefited from its absence." Alejandro cleared his throat. "Maris," he said, "thank you for your clarity. To Damien's son, your mother is right. A home is not collateral." His gaze flicked to Selene, and she looked away. Damien's shoulders sagged. For a moment, I saw the boy he had been. "Mom," he said, quieter, "we were overwhelmed. We thought if the party went well, doors would open." I didn't see how far it had gone. Seeing is a start, I answered. "Repair is next. It will be work." The oak leaves stirred. I turned to the door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The entryway smelled of lemon oil and winter air. I crossed to the dining room, lifted the silver bell from its velvet box, and set it on the hall table. Its surface held my reflection and a winter sky. I returned to the porch and closed the door behind me. "I'm going now," I said. "I will not host today. I will not explain last night. You will all return to your homes and sort yourselves out. When you are ready to speak with respect and with numbers that add up, call me. Until then, you will not enter this house." Selene opened her mouth, but no sound came. Damien nodded once a man choosing to stand still rather than lean on a door that would not open. I went down the steps and walked back to my car. Boots on gravel, one after the other. I did not hurry. I unlocked the door, slid in, and gripped the wheel. Voices resumed somewhere behind me, lower now. I checked the mirror, not for faces, but for the line of trees I have loved since we moved here, a green cathedral that asks only honesty. I pressed the brake, shifted into drive, and let the car roll forward, bright morning opening, like a road you finally chose for yourself. I paused at the stop sign and let a car pass. A cardinal flicked along the curb as a wax seal. I thought of coffee and a list with only my name at the top. I unlocked the front door with a steady hand, the key turning against the morning's brittle quiet. Only 4 people crossed the threshold. Alejandro and Valeria stepped in. First, their faces composed but serious. Damien followed, shoulders tight, while Selene lingered a step behind, eyes darting. The rest of the relatives remained outside, their hushed murmurs drifting through the cold December air. "Ground rules," I said, closing the door. "We speak one at a time. We verify, not accuse." The living room stood bare, no decorations, no sparkle of Christmas morning, only the faint scent of last night's extinguished candles. The absence of festivity settled like a verdict in itself. Alejandro gave a small nod. "Thank you for allowing us in Mary's," he began, voice firm. "We're here for clarity and accountability, nothing else." He placed a leather folder on the coffee table and met everyone's eyes. Let's go through the finances in order. No interruptions. Valeria wheeled a small laptop case forward and opened it with practiced precision. We'll review the materials Maris shared earlier, she said, connecting her computer to my television. The large screen brightened, filling the room with a pale blue glow. Numbers appeared, balances revolving credit, and a scrolling ledger of late fees. Each line item bore Damien's name. My pulse stayed slow, but I heard Damien's sharp intake of breath. These transactions align with party expenditures, boutique purchases, and luxury orders, Valeria explained. Screenshots of text messages popped up, Celine bragging to a friend, "Don't worry, I'll cover it with the house. It'll be ours soon enough." Celane's face flushed crimson. "That's private," she began, but Alejandro raised a hand. "We're verifying, not accusing," he reminded her calmly. I stepped closer to the screen, pointing to a cluster of charges. These hit my cards directly. Here I indicated another set of entries. These were attempted but blocked when I secured my accounts. My voice never wavered. Damien stared at the figures as if they might rearrange themselves into innocence. "I never authorized these," he whispered. "Celine, did you?" He stopped, catching her sidelong glance, and the truth landed heavy. Finally, he turned to me. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mom?" I met his eyes evenly. "Because I needed proof that stood on its own. And now you have it." The room went still except for the soft hum of the television. I reached into my satchel and drew out a slim envelope, sliding it onto the table. "This," I said, "is a time-stamped note from my dinner with attorney Arthur Keene. 3 weeks ago, he advised me to convert the deed to a trust-restrict access and document every misuse. If challenged, I can play his voicemail confirming the filings and dates." Alejandro skimmed the letter and nodded, once the movement slow and deliberate. "Everything here is legally sound." I let the quiet settle before speaking again. "Here are the terms. Damien Celine, you will establish a repayment plan with clear timelines. There will be no more open access to my accounts or property. Any shared expense must be documented and transparent. These are not suggestions. They are boundaries." Celine's lips parted, but no words came. Damien only looked down at his hands, a flush of shame rising across his face. I exhaled, the weight of months sliding off my shoulders. "I don't need apologies," I said softly. "The facts are loud enough." The living room held its silence like a held breath. Outside, I could hear the faint rustle of the waiting relatives as the winter sun began to lift higher over Charleston. For the first time in years, the house and my life felt undeniably mine. The afternoon sun stretched long stripes of light across White Point Garden as I followed the worn path beside the seawall. The December breeze carried a faint salt tang that cooled my cheeks and quieted the noise inside my head. The tense gathering in my living room felt both immediate and far away, like a dream you can still taste, but no longer fear. I let each step settle what had cracked open that morning, what was lost, what survived, and what no longer needed to be carried. I paused beneath a giant oak whose branches arched like open arms. The silence here was different from the silence of my house, not empty, but peaceful, steady. I thought of the years I had spent patching gaps in this family of the boundaries I should have drawn sooner, of the trust I finally chose to protect. Mom Damien's voice broke the hush. I turned to see him standing a few yards away, hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. His shoulders sloped with something heavier than the cold. He approached slowly. "I didn't want to leave it like that," he said, eyes fixed on the ground. I should have seen what Celine was doing. I kept telling myself it was just stress, that she had it handled. But I was negligent. "I'm sorry." I waited, letting the words rest between us. I met with Alejandro. He continued, voice unsteady. "We set up a repayment plan, every cent with interest. I've already contacted the banks to close the accounts she opened. It'll take time, but it's the least I can do." The ache in my chest softened, though it remained. "Thank you for facing it," I said quietly. "That matters more than you know." He lifted his eyes to mine, a flicker of the boy who once trusted me with every secret. "I want to earn back that trust, Mom, if you'll let me." I nodded a small gesture carrying years of weight. "Trust is built in steps," I said. "We'll take them carefully." We sat on a bench overlooking the water. I spoke clearly, each word a boundary drawn in calm ink. Our finances stay separate. The trust remains exactly as it is. Visits are welcome, but only with respect and notice. No more assumptions. Damien nodded without hesitation. Agreed. Completely. His voice held remorse, but also a quiet resolve I hadn't heard in years. The wind shifted, carrying the distant ring of church bells. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Tired, yes, but no longer burdened. As the sun lowered, Damien stood. "I'll walk you home," he offered. "Not today," I said with a gentle smile. "I need a little more time." He accepted that with a soft nod, then turned back toward the street. I lingered a while longer, breathing in the scent of winter sea and fallen leaves before heading home. The house welcomed me with stillness. A single text from Celine waited on my phone, short, polite and distant. "I'm staying with a friend for a few days. We'll talk later." I read it once and let it go. Some bridges remain half-built, and that is all right. Dusk draped the windows when I lit a single candle in the living room. Its small flame shimmered against the polished wood, casting a warm glow across the quiet space. I opened a fresh journal and wrote the date, December 25th. I filled the page with gratitude for the lesson of boundaries, for the courage to protect what mattered, for the possibility of healing without surrendering my peace. I promised myself a new tradition next Christmas, a small dinner with close friends, no spectacle, just honest company and steady light. The candle's reflection danced in the glass of the framed family photo on the mantel. For the first time in many winters, the house felt lighter. So did I. The first week of January arrived with a crisp brightness that felt like a promise. Charleston's winter sun painted the cobblestones in silver light as I strolled along King Street, the air cool enough to nip at my cheeks. Shop windows glimmered with fresh displays, bright scarves, early spring flowers, hopeful signs of renewal. Each breath I drew carried the scent of roasted coffee and ocean salt, a quiet reminder that the year had turned, and so had I. A thick envelope waited in my mailbox when I returned home. Damien's handwriting stretched carefully across the front the way he used to label school projects. I carried it to the kitchen table, hands steady. Inside his letter began simply, "Mom, the first repayment has cleared. I'll send you the confirmation each month. Thank you for protecting what you built and for believing I could do better. I'm committed to repairing what I let fall apart." The words were honest without decoration. Reading them, I felt a warmth that was neither nostalgia nor forgiveness, but something gentler, a recognition that trust could be rebuilt, brick by careful brick. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in quiet relief. That weekend, Vera and Alejandro hosted a neighborhood gathering at their airy veranda. Lanterns swung in the light breeze as neighbors arrived with pies and stories. I walked there at dusk, bringing a basket of fresh bread, and was greeted with easy smiles. We traded laughter recipes and tales of the holidays, some joyful, some complicated. When Vera clasped my hand and said, "We're glad you're here," I felt a deeper connection than I'd expected. These friendships were becoming a circle of support that asked nothing of me but presence, and gave in return the comfort of belonging. The next morning, I signed up for a local art workshop, something I hadn't touched since my 20s. That evening, I unpacked a small sketchbook and a set of graphite pencils from the back of a closet. Lines began to flow across the page, the curve of an oak branch, the play of shadows on cobblestones. Each stroke reawakened a part of me that had been waiting quietly for decades. Night settled gently as I sat by the window with a single candle flickering beside me. I opened my journal and wrote of resilience, of lessons etched in steady ink. Strength can be quiet, and new life often begins when you finally claim your own story. The flame mirrored the light I now carried within, steady, unhurried, and wholly mine. The second Sunday of January carried a gentle light soft enough to touch the marsh grass with a silver shimmer. I sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from my mug, and opened the morning mail. 2 envelopes rested on the polished wood like small, quiet conclusions. The first contained a notarized family repayment agreement signed by Selene herself. Clear dates, scheduled installments, every amount itemized. The second was a brief note from Alejandro confirming the family's collective action withdrawal of financial backing for Damien and Selene, and a standing alert to guard against future misuse. I slid both documents into the trust binder, the clasp clicking with a finality that sounded almost like a sigh. The storm was officially behind me. A knock on the porch screen announced Damien. He stood alone, a folder tucked under one arm. We settled into the wicker chairs as a mild breeze stirred the camellias. "I've made changes," he said, his tone steady. Inside the folder were credit freeze confirmations, dispute filings, and notices of closed, unauthorized accounts. He handed me a short-term lease, his new address, and an appointment card for counseling sessions on financial boundaries and marriage repair. "I need to build a life that doesn't depend on shortcuts," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "You're taking the right steps," I replied. I offered no rescue, only a blessing for the path he chose. We agreed on scheduled check-ins, planned visits, no assumptions, no open doors without respect. Later that morning, warmth filled the house as neighbors Vera and Clive arrived, joined by Alejandro and Valeria. I kept the menu simple, fresh bread quiche, a pitcher of iced tea. Laughter rose easily as we traded stories of holiday mishaps and shared burnt cinnamon rolls while a curious gull tapped at the dock rail. I lifted my glass and said, "To truth told softly and heard fully." Glasses touched with a bright chime, and I felt the house itself breathe lighter. No spectacle, only sincerity. When the guests departed, I walked to the front door carrying the small silver bell that once belonged to my late husband. I mounted it beside the frame, its cool weight firm in my palm. From this day forward, it would be our boundary ritual: 1, chime for welcome; 2, for caution; 3, for stop. As Damien left, I rang it once. He paused, met my gaze, and understood. No speeches, just a long, steady look. Love with limits. By afternoon, the marsh shimmered beneath a pale winter sun. I sat at my desk and wrote the first promise of the new year: keep the trust, keep my peace, keep my door for respect. Then I marked next December's plan, a small supper. No performance, only those who carry kindness. I closed the journal and let the quiet settle. I had not won by shouting. I had won by staying myself. Looking back on everything I've shared, I realized the real victory wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about standing firm in my own worth. Setting boundaries, protecting what you've built, and choosing peace over drama aren't acts of selfishness. They're acts of love for yourself and for the people who truly care. My story is a reminder that you can start fresh at any age, guard your future, and still keep your heart open to honest connection. What about you? Have you ever had to draw a hard line to protect your peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched you, or share where you're watching from. And if you'd like more heartfelt stories that inspire and empower, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together.